welcome. If you hadn't realized, this is Heavy Chef. And that song goes on for quite some time, and it goes like Heavy Chef, Heavy Chef, Heavy Chef. And then it says licky, 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 boom, boom, and then a Heavy Chef, about like 50 times in a row. So I think it is actually on Spotify. If you put it on one of their playlists, go for your life. You might just lose a few friends, but I'll be happy. My name is Fred Rode. I'm the CEO and founder of Heavy Chef. What a surprise, and welcome to everybody for coming out here and for actually finding the right venue. We found that there's actually a few people at the Workshop 17 watershed venue tonight. So there might be a few people joining us a bit late. Thank you for reading the instructions. Shusha at the back there will be very happy, seeing as she did send a few reminders to make it super clear that it was at Workshop 17 Kloof Street. So well done, you passed the test. But look, it is a very beautiful venue, and we're very happy to be here tonight. So just a quick and hopefully quite brief introduction, but a very impassioned one, just to let you know what it is that we do. Heavy Chef is a learning platform for entrepreneurs, and we believe that entrepreneurs, so the people in this room and your friends and the people that are in the trenches who are building the things that entrepreneurs are the people that can change the world for the better. And that is our core belief. So we exist to serve entrepreneurs, and we want to inspire them to start new businesses and then empower them to succeed. We do that through, if you go to heavychef.com, we have a learning platform. We have thousands of what we call learning bites that are presented and distributed in the form of what we call recipes. So those are kind of like micro courses. Each little learning bite is about 2.5 minutes of learning content, super engaging, super entertaining, and often very practical and valuable for your business. We actually have 2 stars of such recipes on our on the bench tonight. And if you're interested, go check out Khanya and Robyn's recipes that are live on the platform right now. So I encourage everybody who isn't actually signed up to check out heavychef.com. I also want to welcome, I know that there's a few of the women entrepreneurs on the Faithful to Nature platform who are here tonight. So welcome to those of you who are now members of Heavy Chef, as well as there are quite a few people who are recognized in the room who've already entered the South Africa's top 5 most exciting startups entries, which is live at the moment, open for nominations. So if anyone has an awesome startup or is part of an awesome startup, or who knows and who's a fan of an awesome startup, go and check it out. That's www.top5startups.com. And the entries, I believe, close on the 17th of November. So there's a few weeks left to go and submit your startup. I want to just quickly thank some of the partners without whom we would not be here tonight and having this beautiful engagement out in the wild back again after 2.5 years of weirdness. We're actually allowed to have these gatherings. So we have had through all of this time, right from the beginning, since we started Heavy Chef, our partners Payfast and Zero, who've really backed us, and you know, back in 2017, we're really believing in the vision of inspiring and empowering entrepreneurs, and very aligned around our values. We've got the ex-Nilo crew here today. Whoop! So the massive, and just a quick word of honoring this crew here, ex-Nilo, who back in the day used to be a Hitsner. I'm a huge fan of the work that you guys do, and certainly the values that you embody within your team and within the company and within the work that you do, and the sheer passion that you show for the very many entrepreneurs that you have in your community and who use your services. Ex-Nilo, for anyone who doesn't know, is South Africa's biggest hosting provider, and we've been around for now, I think, 20 years, right? And 22 years. And yeah, I mean, I have fond memories. with my business partners of working with your service centers back in the day and just being amazed by how passionate you were about service delivery. So honoring to you guys, and thank you for being part of the mix and supporting Heavy Chef. Also, Workshop 17, the crew here, who've just also supported us right from the beginning and been such amazing hosts for all of our gatherings. But not only that, also for us, the ability to tap into their very, very deep knowledge of community and education and so on. Capitalize. We've got a few people from Capitalize here. Where's Alex? Where are you, dude? There we go. Alex is quite shy. He put up like one finger at the back there. Capitalize is a great new partner, fairly new partner of Heavy Chef. And we've got some of the crew here from Capitalize. Victor, John, Loyolo, is that how you say your name? So welcome, guys. Good to have you in the mix. And then Whipping the Cat, Graham is not here today. If you ever see at one of our events this tall, very erudite, strapping English gentleman, he's not actually English. He just looks English, but he's and he just looks loyally, right? That's Graham from Whipping the Cat. He's won a bunch of awards for the work that he's done in what's called New Law, and just kind of shaking the tree of those big, very staid, established law firms. He's doing something fresh and exciting and really supporting entrepreneurs around the country. And then just our venue partners and the community partners of whom we are quite literally drinking from the fruit of their work. Backsberg wine, just some of the best wines in the world, and also, again, a great entrepreneurial success story. So Fruit, Goodleaf. We've got the Creed Living crew here. Gio, good to see you, my man, and back in the mix. Global Citizen, just a big thanks to our tech team, Paolo and Gavin. And then last, I just want to say a real thank you to the Heavy Chef team, which, Juja, Zinhle, Randall, Halen, Bronwyn, Zola, Mo, Siabonga, Lucanio, Yolandi, Charmaine, Louis. You guys are absolute legends for all the work that we do. I know it's bloody hard. We are a content machine, for those of you who are familiar with what we do, and just the sheer amount of output that comes from this relatively small team is just insane. And so just an honoring and a thank you to you guys for that amazing work. A quick last word. I keep saying the last word. I shouldn't say that because it's a lie. I've got about 10 more minutes up here, guys. So, jokes, not really. You guys are like, shut up, Fred. So, just a word to say, a huge, a word of gratitude, I guess, is the word that comes to mind, to Mike Perk, my business partner, co-founder, investor in Heavy Chef. Mike, stand up. Can we give you a round of applause? Stand up, Mike. Stand up, Mike. There we go. There he is. Please, everyone, go and introduce yourselves to Mike afterwards. Sorry, the reason I do that is actually he's the shyest dude in the world. So he's probably going to hide in the corner there. So please track him down. But, dude, you're a brother, and thank you for all the support through everything. And then, lastly, I mean it this time. So just one little thing I wanted to mention is that there's a prize tonight. So behind me, there is a bag. In the bag, there is a bunch of goodies. These things we call the Heavy Chef hampers. And we awarded to the best question or engagement of the evening. So there is a mic over there. You've got to do the walk of fame. So if you feel the stirring in your belly and something that's really kind of bothering you about the values within your company or your society or your friends, crew, whatever it may be, and you have a burning desire to ask the question, go and stand there, and Zinhle will call you up. And just make it a question, not a statement, because we have had a few of those long 10-minute soliloquies up there. And inside it, we have, it's about 1,000 rands worth of goodies. So it's a box of collagen. Thank you to Creed Living. a bottle of award-winning Backsberg wine, 4 bars of brand new CBD-infused Goodleaf snacks, which won't get you high, I promise. They might get you a little bit high, I don't know. And then one of just the most amazing book you'll ever read. It's mine. It's I got something in my eye. As luck would have it, I was just saying to Robyn earlier, I got something in my eye at an event last year. And it just kind of brings a tear to my eye. So I'm just emotional tonight. And yeah, so the best question of tonight will win this hamper, and we will have a crew discussion in the back there to decide, and we will announce it right at the end. So do engage, do get to know one another, do ask questions, and do enjoy tonight. Thank you. Over to you, Zinhle, my awesome colleague at Heavy Chef. Over to you.
Thanks, Red. Good evening, everyone. I hope you are all excited to be here tonight. Thank you for taking the time to be with us. I'm really excited because we have an all-female panel. How awesome is that? Yay. Values can be quite an interesting topic, and that's why we have 2 of our biggest heavy chefs when it comes to this topic. And as it's tradition to often ask, I'm not going to introduce Robyn and Khanya. I'm going to actually ask them to do that for us and to tell us, because in all our recipes, if you haven't checked out our recipes yet, I'm pleading with you tonight, you must do so. If they can tell us what, tell us a little bit about yourself, your business, and what your key ingredient to success has been so far. I'll start with Robyn and then we can go over to Khanya.
So good evening, everyone. I founded Faithful to Nature, which is an online organic and natural business. I'm hoping most of you here have heard of it. I founded it 16 years ago. And I think like many entrepreneurs, I had left something really good to found this business. And it was quite an utopian ideal that I was looking for. I was trying to create impact, make the world a better place. I wanted to be the same person at work as I was at home, which is the lead into values, of course, because I wanted to be able to confidently and passionately express who I was in the work environment. And that was part of my story in creating a values-based business, because Faithful to Nature was something that was really birthed from a personal desire and therefore from my heart.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. And sure, how do you follow that? My name is Khanya Mncwabe, and I'm a founder of Matawi, which is a mead company. And I, like Robyn also, I used to work as a human rights practitioner, lots of policy development work. And I think the last stint that I had was providing a lot of technical support to the African Union. And so it was just a lot of moving around the continent. But I started feeling conflicted about my work. I went into it with lofty ambitions, but I was increasingly visiting communities that I would find either in the same position or worse off. And I felt that it was not right to be fundraising, purporting to be improving people's lives, and feeling like it wasn't going to happen in my lifetime. And so the move to start Matawi, I didn't sort of wake up and think, let me go make booze. But it was really around the time that South Africa was going through the drought. And so it was a lot of conversations about, you know, what happens to this province if that is very reliant on agriculture, and a large component of that actually the spirits and wine industry. And so also a utopian dream. How do you establish a water-friendly form of alcohol that can continue contributing to GDP, but that can also contribute to job creation and income creation for our most marginalized people? And that is kind of what I'm trying to build.
Wow. I'm already inspired. I feel like I just need to mesmerize on what was just been said. But in line with what you've both now shared, I think a lot of us, maybe before we started businesses, we always thought of values as this wishy-washy concept. And we're slowly starting to realize how important it is to ground a business in values. But how does one go about kind of establishing what values you should align your business with. Like, if you guys can kind of give us advice, if I'm starting a business or I already have one and I'm questioning the values around it, what are kind of the key points that you guys use to establish that these are going to be the values that will ground my business?
So I have to confess that I have a little cheat, which is that my job before I started Faithful to Nature was as an innovation consultant at a very successful innovation firm in London. And I was on the team that worked around developing culture. And the core component of creating any kind of desired culture is a strong value system. So I did come with a little bit of intellectual property back to South Africa on doing this, and we'll be speaking to that a lot tonight. But in my experience, the first place that you need to start is your mission statement. It's why are you getting out of bed in the morning? You need to know, like, very clearly what it is that you're doing. So I'll give you an example. Faithful to Nature sell natural and organic products, but that's not why we get out of bed in the morning. We get out of bed in the morning because we are selling trust and respect to our customers. That's actually what we're selling. So when you're very clear on your mission statement and why it is that you're getting out of bed in the morning, from there, I think it is a lot easier to start determining which of your values are important to the how of what you are doing.
Yeah, no, so just to be like frank disclosure, Robyn and I actually met today, but I'm struck by the resonance in our stories. So as I describe, my sort of former life was also in the human rights space. And if you check out my recipe, which you should, I do describe how when you start an entrepreneurial venture, it really has to be aligned and consistent with who you are. And so just as Robyn has said, hers was, you know, in the innovation space and working, sort of setting out from a premise of culture. Mine was very much human rights frameworks. And so when I was thinking about Matawi and what are the sort of what's baked into the DNA of who we are, there's several things that I knew were non-negotiables. Some of them were taken from our Bill of Rights, so I'm very strong on upholding people's dignity, and that is a conversation that is a recurrent one within my team. What does that look like? What does that look like when you're working downstream with communities who are not sophisticated? What does that look like when you're interacting with suppliers? So that's really a core value. But then we also spent a great deal thinking about the ethos of what we do. And if we're about, you know, it's not so much community development as it is about creating income-generating opportunities, which means that we're tackling systemic inequality in South Africa, and we're also wanting to tackle entrenched poverty, then it really becomes about actually activating agency. And so those are all the sort of core constructs that we work around. But we're also plugged into a global economy. So if we're thinking about the Sustainable Development Goals, then it becomes even easier for us to actually track our indicators and not to sort of make wishy-washy sounding statements. And so the way that I've designed this business is as a project, because I worked in the development space for so many years. And so it really is about, okay, so which of these indicators are we tackling? And we know we're tackling gender inequality, we're tackling poverty, we're tackling unemployment. And so we really do have to report on all of those as we go. But then it's also about consistency. If we say that we're a company that is also about environmental sustainability and that we're wanting to start thinking circular economy, it doesn't make sense for us to have a product that's produced in a sustainable way but to use rubbish packaging. So you really do have to start thinking holistically as well about your values at every single inflection point, every single touch point.
Sure. Just what you both touch on, the commonality there, it seems like you both had to really know who you are and what you're grounded in. So for people that are faced with a conflict where they believe there should be a separation between your own personal values and the values that your business has, what would you say to that? Is it that you first have to kind of find a grounding in who you are and what you believe in? For instance, if I wasn't somebody who really cared about empowering people or about people's dignity, would I be able to then push a business that is centered around what you do, for instance? So how important is it to sort of have, that consistency between the values that you have and the values that your business has, or should they be two separate value systems?
I'm happy to weigh in first. So I think you really have to be authentic. So many corporates will espouse certain values, but they don't translate into how people receive them or perceive them. So that's the one thing I have to say. And I think that it's the reason that you have to be quite intentional about. I often say that values are not, if you don't espouse your values, your customers will tell you what your values are. And that is either through positive or negative reinforcement. And also, values aren't static, and they are definitely not a top-down endeavor. So you really have to, I think, not co-create so much as collectively elaborate what your values are. I have quite a young team, and you can imagine that the liquor space is also very aspirational, and there's a certain sort of public perception about what the alcohol space is. But what I love about working with my team is that they hold me to account. So I cannot say that I'm about activating agency and then try to micromanage people and have issues about people working independently and delivering. And that's what I mean about really being authentic, is that you will know your values, even if you haven't sat down and had a strategic planning session centered on your values. But it also requires you to be frank, vulnerable, and honest, because they will be mirrored back to you. You will be challenged on what you've said you stand for. You will be called to account for not consistently delivering on the values that you purport to stand for.
So just building on all of that, because I really love what you've said, I think it would be very difficult if you didn't espouse the same values, because the way I see it is your mission statement is like your skeleton of your company, and the values are the muscles that hold up that skeleton. And when we're building culture and we're building a values-based business, we need to have cues at all levels. And the most important cue is going to come from the role modeling of your leadership. And you can't role model values that you don't authentically aspire to yourself. Because these values are, if they are the right values for your business, they will determine who you hire, they will determine who you fire, how you fire, and most importantly, they will determine all of your business strategy. So I think that it's really important actually that there is a match of values. And I really agree that your values will be mirrored back to you in your customer feedback. And I do have to say that if you are not being challenged by your values, that you probably don't have the right set of values, because your values should be challenging you to do business in a way that's harder than the norm. And the thing is that the values are the portal with which you connect to your customers. Okay, the values are the way that you cement and you create that customer loyalty. And if your values are not challenging you, they are probably not differentiating you strong enough in the market.
Sure, that's some solid advice from both of you. And if I can just continue on that note, you've been in business for quite a long time. Have you found that you've had to reframe your values? Do you ever find that your business outgrows certain values, so you have to continuously sort of go back and reframe and re-challenge yourself? So perhaps you've achieved certain steps that are in line with a specific goal or value, and now you've got to like up it a little bit. Can you talk us through that? And also, Khanya, if you've experienced something similar where you've had to, from the initial stage when you started Matawi, and you've had to kind of reframe the values, take us through that.
So it's a really topical point for Faithful to Nature, because I founded the business 16 years ago, but I'm not operationally involved anymore. And our values are changing slightly, and perhaps contentious. I don't believe our values should be changing. I think that there's core values that need to remain And the very fact that they're challenging us so much means that the values are doing their job. You know, I firmly believe that the values are the single most important thing in allowing us to scale our businesses. Because if our value system is strong enough to set strategy and strong enough to determine the type of people we're bringing into our business and the type of people we're not keeping in our business, then we are able to scale a lot quicker. And a really solid set of values should also help us with turnover, especially in Faithful to Nature's instance, where we've had a business that's very much based on the personality of its founder, and its founder has stepped out, I think more than ever. It's really important to maintain those values. I will say one other thing though. Of course, things do change, and product offerings may change, customers may change, and, you know, environments do change. So while I am exercising caution against changing values, because most of the time we're likely to change values because they're challenging us. When values do change, I would say that our internal marketing is as important as our external marketing, because you've hired the people that you've hired on those values. And so they really subscribe to the same idea you do as to why they're getting out of bed every morning. And I see many companies making that mistake, that so much effort goes into the external communication, and then there's big cultural shifts, damaging cultural shifts within a company.
So I think I'll take it back to what Robyn said about values being the skeleton. And in our case, we formally incorporated in 2018, so we haven't been around as long as you have. And of course, COVID nicks 2 years out of everybody's life, so we're younger than we actually are. But having said that, I think if you think of the values as the skeleton and culture as the muscle that sort of, you know, allows you to limber and maneuver that skeleton, a great deal of time and investment and focus will actually be spent on giving expression to those values. I also don't believe that values need to shift or that they should shift. I think it's a cop-out often on corporate's part. And I can give you a practical example. We've spent a great deal of effort articulating our values. They are in all of our public interfaces. But we've spent a lot more time fleshing out what that means. And I used the example previously of what dignity looks like sort of downward. And that's because I started noticing that my team would have very different approach when, you know, going to suppliers or trying to place on consumption. And then when it was time for us to sort of meet the rural communities that we're wanting to bring into supply chain, there was a level of dismissiveness that was disconcerting to me. And so I sort of said, you know, this is schizophrenic, what's going on here? And I realized that, you know, they just didn't know what professionalism looks like in a rural context. And so we then had to spend a lot of time talking about the need to slow pace, the need to really be conscious about avoiding condescension in this context, about honoring people in the way that they are accustomed to being honored, which means not rushing into facilitation, but really taking time to greet. And so if it means 30 minutes of meet and greet and people going into their clan names and doing a weather check on how they're feeling today. So then you're able to actually give expression, which means that you're able to provide people with the riverbanks for what respect looks like within this organization. And so it means that your fundamental values don't need to shift, but that you're actually able to give them content.
I think that's a really incredible example, which links to how if you're really firm and based in the values that your business believes in, everyone aligns to that. So including your employees, the engagement that you have with particular communities. So I think that was really well put. And for both of you, I think we actually had this discussion earlier this evening that, you know, a lot of businesses are struggling. Sometimes you're not meeting your revenue margins. And it could be that somebody brings an opportunity. Let's say during COVID for you, somebody would have said, listen, I'm selling alcohol on the down low. Let's just go make money. Or it could have been that, you know, Faithful to Nature is so strong on selling let's say, truth and that trust, that somebody says, okay, it's not really organic, but let's just play around with the label a little bit and this will increase profit. So when you're given an opportunity to increase revenue, but it comes at the cost of compromising your company or your business's values, how much or how important is it to stick to your values regardless of what the opportunity might be that appeals to you?
So this goes back to your second question about whether your value system of your leadership should mirror the personal values and the company values. Because I think that if they do, it's a lot easier to hold this when the going gets tough. And the key question, and I'm hoping that everyone here has the same answer, but the key question is, are we, with our business, trying to produce like a one-hit wonder, or are we trying to create legacy? Because again, I'll say that your values are your portal that you reach your customers. And they are the thing that sets your business apart. They are the thing that differentiates your business. So you start going soft on your values, and when you do that, you create an opportunity for someone else to take that positioning. And I believe that there's a loss of brand equity that you will never regain. So I think that when times get tough, it calls for strong innovation, and it calls for strong creativity, and this is part of the culture that you want in your business. But it actually calls for a stronger take on your values than ever, because it's more likely that there are players around you in the market who are going to start going soft on their values too, adding to that point of differentiation. Your customers are going to come along with the ride, and if your customers are still going to be on the train, at the end of the tough time, it will be because you're still on the same train.
Yeah, no, so in my former life, one of the things that I had to do, I worked for the Business and Human Rights Resource Center. And a great deal of our day-to-day was literally reaching out to corporates who had allegations against them, provide them with the right of response. And the one thing I can say is that you have to ask yourself whether you are going to go into the business of greenwashing, which is just incredibly laborious, and it's incredibly time-consuming, and it's incredibly expensive. And I think what happens when you values drift is that, as Robyn rightly said, you lose that brand equity. But more than anything, it's not just about the reputational risk. You also get to a point where those who bought into you because of your brand promise reach a point where they're literally just rolling their eyes, because it's no longer holding up. Your claims are no longer holding up. And so I think my biggest fear actually is that as we are small, it's very easy to entrench our values. It's very easy for me to recruit and to induct hands-on. But I think the challenge does become more challenging as you sort of grow out to become a conglomerate. And so I constantly have that at the back of my mind, that my bitter end is having clientele who are rolling their eyes at the claims that we're making. You really do want to ensure that the legacy holds true and that the legacy holds firm.
Thank you. Guys, I want to include you in this conversation. So if people have questions, you can start walking up to the mic, because I'm drinking from the knowledge of wisdom. And obviously, we also want you guys to all be part of this dialogue. And whilst we're in this moment, Oprah calls it an aha moment. I've been having a lot of those. Every time they say something, like a new light bulb has been coming to mind. So if you had an aha moment, share it with somebody sitting near you about anything that they've said tonight, that they've shared that was profound, changed your mindset about something, or made you think about a value that needs to change or needs to be realigned with who you are, anything. So 30 seconds. And if anyone wants to ask a question, now's your time to step up to the mic.
My name is Roxanne. I just recently launched my own skills development academy in the wine industry. And I've been noticing a few things taking place in the last few months that relate to values and the connection or the alignment between the values of my business and the values of the collaborator. And my question is, what from your experience can you share around the moment and especially after some time has transpired working with these collaborators, from your experience, when is the time to cut the ties when you see that the values are not aligned? They seem aligned, but then when the work happens, you know, little flags go up, and you know, I can only put my foot down so many times. I can only send those hardcore emails so many times. And so when is the time to say thanks, but no thanks?
So nice to see you, Roxanne. So Roxanne is a sommelier who really championed us and encouraged us in the early days. It's lovely to see you, Roxanne. That is a really, really great question. And what I try to do is really to take a stakeholder approach to my work. And I think the question you have to ask yourself is, to whom is loyalty most due? And the answer to that question actually informs who you advocate for. And the reason I say that is because it becomes easier to articulate and to send those difficult messages if you know who you're speaking for, and how you're setting out the terms of engagement, sort of moving forward. I also think that the conversation often opens up an opportunity for actually future work and further work, because it does initiate a dialogue. And so it's no longer just a case of I'm issuing an ultimatum. It's actually saying, this is who I am, this is who we are, these are our values. We perceived us to have value alignment, but the conduct, and this is why I was saying that your values do get reflected back to you, but this and this and this and this specific incident or conduct is completely at odds with the values that you espouse. The reason it's great is because it basically, it sets you up to affirm and reaffirm your values, which makes it easier then to have the distinction between who is for you and who is not. So I'm not a marketing person, and one of the things that my marketing lead keeps saying to me is that it's as important to determine the profile of your customer as it is to determine the profile of who is not your customer. And so that then becomes your reputational unique proposition, that if you are parting ways with someone, you can best believe that they will be bemoaning the fact that you've gone separate ways. But for someone, the ears on which that bemoanment lands will alert them that, oh, actually, but this is my tribe. This is where I want to go. This is definitely someone I can work with.
So, Roxanne, I think it's really an issue of leadership. And I can share a little bit of the story of Faithful to Nature by way of inspiration. But the very first thing that I did to establish our values was to create an ingredient policy. So this policy determined which products we would stock and which ingredients we would stock, and ultimately who we would work with. And in doing so, there was a huge amount of industry disruption that happened. I was 26 at the time, and many brands that I'd looked up to as being amazing suddenly wouldn't disclose ingredient lists when I would ask for ingredient lists. And there were really well-known brands that wouldn't share their ingredients. So I had to get over being liked very quickly because I wasn't well-liked in many instances. I upset many suppliers who thought that their products should be listed on Faithful to Nature, but they weren't. I have to tell you that one of our 5 values is bravery. And it's a value I really had to rely on in the beginning. But where I'm going with all of this is that it was hard work initially, speaking to what Khanya said about it, how it does get easier. But eventually, and where I come back to with leadership, was that the more and more stringent we started getting with the filters that we were creating, the more and more impact we started having, not only on the way that our customers could shop, but the way that our suppliers were starting to behave in the industry. So I'll give you some examples. You know, we created these ethical shopping filters, and suddenly you could see whether your products were listed as being plastic-free or whether they had palm oils. We were starting to make things more and more and more transparent. And we had so many of our suppliers who started reformulating their products and changing their packaging because they wanted to see their products listed in those categories. And that's where I go back to leadership. So where I'm going with all of this is that a really strong set of values will cause disruption, and that's a good thing.
Sure. So the question then is, how brave are we to stand strong in our values, like despite the circumstances, despite the challenges? From what I've learned from both Khanya and Robyn's responses is that we shouldn't actually fear whether we're going to lose clients or you're going to lose certain partnerships if they don't align with who you are. If anything, it's streamlining the direction that you're going in. It's propelling and attracting the right people that are supposed to be geared towards your path. I'm going to just check if we do have questions on the floor. If not, I might reach out for some of our community online questions that were given to us earlier this week. Is anyone feeling brave? Oh, wow.
I normally don't get this. Is the shy guy. But I love this subject. So, Robyn, this is particularly to you because I'm very interested in what you were saying around the challenge that you've felt since you've left your baby. It's not a baby anymore. It's a teenager. You've let it loose. And those values are being challenged. So from a very practical perspective, can you maybe share some of the things you felt you did while you were in the operation, which have helped to sustain those values? And maybe now you've exited and you're seeing people challenge them, and maybe some of those values changing because the behaviors are changing, you're not there, that you think, oh, I wish I'd done that as part of the operation in order to help sustain those values after you left. So 2 parts of the question.
It's a really good 2 questions. So to be clear, it's not that the values of Faithful to Nature are changing. They are being challenged. The wording of the values are changing. And even when I was leading the company, the amount of discussions we would have about a single ingredient. If I could explain the hours and hours and hours we spent debating on whether we should stock omega oils, okay? Because were we vegan? Were we vegetarian? Was it ethical to stock omega oils? And eventually we decided, okay, we will stock omega oils, but we'll stock the very best. And then the discussions happened around collagen. So, we do a lot of debate inside the company. I don't think people realize the hours, the weeks, the months, the blood and the sweat and the tears around those boardroom tables when it comes to ingredients. But that's the key, is the ingredient policy. And so I feel that was the best thing that I ever did for my baby, was to create a policy that our customers bought into. And so no one in their right mind would ever come into Faithful to Nature and disrupt that policy too much. So much so that I'm still involved in the company, even though I'm not operationally involved as the ethics director, because our shareholders recognized that they needed to keep me to support that values integration over time. But I will share one tip with you to answer your second part of the question in terms of what we did, was that I created something called the Values Awards in Faithful to Nature. I think that it was a really genius way of rewarding and role modeling the values, and now I'm realizing how arrogant I sound, sorry. But what we did is that every quarter we had a values wall, and we would have the values. We had 5 values. We have 5 values up on the wall. We've got 6 values now, but then we had 5 values up on the wall. And our staff could nominate each other for a story where they saw someone living out that value. So the values were bravery, action, care, love, and passion, okay? And so there was this incredible culture of storytelling. It also created a beautiful horizontal platform in terms of how we were rewarding how we were rewarding our values. Because you as the CEO could get nominated by one of the warehouse staff for a value, and you as a marketing manager could go and nominate the cleaning lady or the person who was taking care of the box creation in the warehouse for a value. And I don't believe that the Values Awards happen as regularly as they probably did when I was running the company, but they do still happen. And so it's an incredible way to cue and to signal to your staff how important it is, because whoever wins the Values Awards gets a cash prize. And there obviously is no better way of rewarding your staff or being serious about something than actually giving them cash. So I hope that answers your question.
I was going to be mischievous and just say that I know it was directed to Robyn, but as a CEO who is trying very hard to work myself swiftly out of this position, I can speak to some of the measures that I'm taking to make sure that our values are deeply entrenched. One of the things that I strongly believe in is that it is very easy as a corporate organization to make claims. The claims often go untested, they go unchecked, and unless you've got a little legion of sort of business and human rights specialists running around on the ground, very rarely are they even interrogated. And so one of our priorities, I mean, it's a ridiculous one to have for a startup just because it is so expensive, but one of our priorities is making sure that there is integrated certification, sustainability certification, amongst our entire supply chain. And the reason for that is because we want to be sure that we are independently audited to ascertain the extent to which we are in fact upholding the values that we espouse. And that is incredibly important to me because, as I said, like first tranche grant that we get, we are recruiting a business-oriented CEO, just so that I can sort of take over the community development side. And we want to make sure that there really is that integrated end-to-end looking deeply into our operations on a recurrent basis, on an ad hoc basis, to be taken, by the element of surprise, and to make sure that we are held to account.
Sure. I'm going to reach into our online questions from our online community. And one of the questions is, are we moving from a shareholder value, equity owner wealth creation, to stakeholder value, consumer community wealth? Anyone can answer that question.
It's interesting. I think if that question was posed pre-COVID, we would have spoken about how it's an aspiration. But I think what COVID has definitely shown us is that it is the reality now. People are a lot more invested in buying where their money makes a difference. That's the one thing. And I think that conscious consumers are incredibly loyal. They are incredibly brand loyal. They are often more concerned with the values than they are with the pricing model. And I think because of that, any organization that is still committed to shareholder value is going to be a dinosaur, hopefully.
I agree with
you. Can I just say that when I first started speaking to investors for Faithful to Nature, there were a few investors that we got quite far in the process with. And one of the things that I would say to them is that you have to understand that we're not sitting around a boardroom table talking about how we can make it look like we care. Okay? We're sitting around a boardroom table talking about how we do care. And if you come into the business and you support the business, you really have to understand that. And I feel that customers can smell that from a mile away. And I agree that that conversation is getting sharper with COVID. I think it's only going to get sharper and sharper. But I also think it's because our consumers are maturing. I firmly believe that brand equity, that gold dust, that's so difficult to objectify, comes from values that a customer feels in another business. So the customer might not even know that they're looking for that, but it's that thing that translates across the mind barrier into the heart, are the values.
Sure. And another question we have is, what is the consequences of not defining business values? So I think often, because I even remember Fred used to do this with us in Heavy Chef, really kind of explain the values to us. And like, we all started living those values when we were consuming the recipes. So like, how important is it to make sure that you have a buy-in from absolutely everyone? So if you as a leader are failing to communicate that to your employees, to your stakeholders, what are the type of consequences? So why is it so important that we actually communicate it on all levels?
Well, you've got an alignment issue if you don't. That's why the values are the skeletal system of a business. And it's why I believe that the values are so important to allowing your business to scale. There's no such thing as growing too fast if your values are being lived and breathed at every space. But I'll give you an example of where we went wrong. In the early days, while I was still maturing into how important our values were, we would hire people for Faithful to Nature because of their interest in natural and organic. So that was really important to us. Were they living a natural and organic lifestyle? But you would have heard earlier that actually, those weren't our values. Our values were, is this person brave? Does this person really care? Is this person passionate? Are they willing to take action? And it was only when we started recruiting on our values rather than the interests of our employees that we started to see beautiful customer retention, and we really started to solidify culture.
I'm just going to go back again to, if you do not elaborate your values, you shall learn them in the marketplace. You know, what I love about the digital age is that in real time, people will point out incongruities in the way that they are treated by a business that professes to be inclusive and welcoming and dedicated to diversity. I can tell you now that there is a black Twitter, and it is real. And so if you put that on your corporate identity, make sure that that is in fact the case, because otherwise, within a matter of minutes, 56 million South Africans will know otherwise. And I think it's important to go through the process of codifying those values precisely so that you can actually make sure that they are disseminated within your organization. And I love the idea of the Values Awards. I'm going to crib those, Robyn, because you really do need to make sure not just to codify them. So for me, policy is something that lives. It's something that is espoused and carried through by your strongest brand ambassadors, who are your employees. And so if there is someone within the organization who doesn't in fact know that you are committed to upholding the dignity of all the human beings with whom your company comes into contact, then there's a serious problem.
Robyn and Khanya, you've both mentioned how you've basically used your values to either recruit or find partners. How does that practically, how does that practically play out? So if you've got a position open for a marketing officer, how do you test out your values to check if somebody aligns with the values of your company or a partner?
Do you want me to weigh in first? Sure. So I did describe just the extent to which and the time invested in sort of fleshing out what the values look like, we tend to use the senses. So I sort of talk to my team about what they look like, what they feel like, what they smell like, what they sound like. And I find that it's a really good rule of thumb because it's early days yet, so I actually do have the bandwidth and the space to be able to actually meet and test out people's relationality. I went through so many marketing agencies, and it quickly became apparent that one of the values that I hadn't really given expression to, but that it's sort of like the magic sauce. Like, you know it when you know it. You don't know how to describe it, but you know it. And one of the things that it became apparent in working sort of with rural communities, that one of the challenges that we had was not to over discourse, like not to sort of get caught up in jargon and conceptual things that are outside the realm of people who don't necessarily have formal education, but who are smart as anything. And I realized that's what it was with me. I was going into marketing meetings as a person who didn't even know how to brief because I didn't have the jargon and I didn't have the technical spec. And so I was coming up against a lot of what I was trying to avoid in my downstream conversations. And as a result of that, I was leaving feeling some kind of way, but not really being able to elaborate it. But the company that I'm working with now, I met with the managing director, and he was just incredibly relational. And as soon as I felt it, I knew it. And so I knew that this was not someone who was going to be dismissive. It wasn't someone who was going to exploit me by virtue of my ignorance. And so we've built out that relationship. And I think that's why, sort of working with values is a lifetime commitment, that you really do need to be able to get to a point where you're like, what is this thing? And, once you're able to give expression to it, then you're actually able to then embed it again within those bricks that are your foundation.
So perhaps quite a simple answer, but really going back to our initial days too, when I was very much involved in recruiting ourselves, is we would interview on the values. We would ask people to give us examples, scenarios of those values, and it really gave us an insight if they understood what the values were.
So, thank you. Both of those answers are really nice and practical. We're actually almost out of time, but I want to check if there's anyone who's itching to ask a question. Now's the opportunity.
Hi,
Hi.
my name is Andrea, and I run a small business, and I'm a supplier to Faithful to Nature. But I also work very closely with another business, I guess. It's a community school, and we've kind of started as a business and are now an NGO. But we have a governance structure that is very linear, and you speak a lot about leadership and values. And if you don't have a leadership as a business runs, like a CEO, and our governance structure works with a group of parents and teachers, and they own and run the school. And we started with these amazing values, and they've worked well up till now, and we've reached a point where there's other people who are weaving in, and they're wanting to change things. So when you have a governance structure that is quite different, how do you navigate that? And I think this kind of governance is becoming more common and is revolutionary. But I would love to see it more, but it's really hard. And we're fighting against the values that we started with and that the core group that was there really still believe in, but there's so many other people coming in, and I would love to, I would love to your advice on how we would be able to navigate such a different governance structure.
So, like retrospectively, this is where policy would help so much. But in the situation that you've described, I feel that your best target market are your students. And do your students know the value system? And is it all over the walls of the school? So is the environment and the environmental and the cultural structures of your committee, of your community, screaming the values? And if not, how can you get them to do that?
I think another point, and this one I'm struggling to sort of articulate it because I want to say that your values should remain consistent, but I think that you shouldn't feel threatened when they are challenged. And the reason I say that is because I serve on several boards that practice sort of that radical flat structure. And it's either that there's a rotating chair or that there is just like constant negotiation of consensus. But what I've learned is that the process is often more important than the decision, commitment, action, or result. And that's because the process actually gives you a great opportunity to really test the resilience of those values. I think what's difficult is that where you do have founder syndrome, it is important to make sure that the transmission of those values happens recurrently and that there also is collective buy-in, because that will determine whether or not they are still relevant and fit for purpose. And I think, when it comes to those flat structures, it is hard. There is no getting around it. If you are committed to a process of sort of radical democracy, that radical component means that you are constantly being pushed, that you are constantly coming up against the bounds, and that there almost is a temptation to default back to the norm, just because it is far more efficient and effective at a turnover. But if you genuinely believe in that model, I think stick with it, because it is a beautiful model. And the dividends are slower to achieve, but the results are more enduring.
Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any more questions. Remember, there is a prize at stake tonight, so if you do want to go home with a bottle of wine, I know I'm itching to have one. So, yeah, if there is any more questions, I will be taking one more question from the crowd, and then we will be closing for this evening because we want to allow...
Okay, thanks. My name is Mike. I work for a company called the Sun Exchange. It's in the renewable solar industry space. Robyn, I think this one goes to you, but Khanya, I'd also love to hear your view on it too. As a stockist of independent brands, you are reliant on their authenticity and honesty around their sustainability claims. What checks and balances do you have in place to make sure that those claims can in fact be upheld, but especially in a world where you can't go out and run independent audits on these brands? I suppose there has to be a pure alignment on values. So yeah, maybe you could give me a bit of background to that. Thank you.
Sure, it's a great question. I keep harping on about policy, but it really has been, it's been our biggest pillar. And you must understand that when I created Faithful to Nature, to the best of my knowledge, there was no such thing as an ingredient policy that any retailer was prepared to share with its customers because of how difficult it would be to uphold. And so for most of our suppliers, obviously we go back to ingredients. I really am not exaggerating, and our suppliers who do have multiple ingredients in their products will understand that every single ingredient policy, every single ingredient in every single product is checked before we will stock it. Even if there is an upgrade to the product, that happens. Because we found that, we can't always rely on the certification. We are not a certification body. And so suppliers can come to us with claims. And that's why we went back to the ingredient list. We were like, but no one can lie about the ingredients in the cake. So we're really going to go with that. I would love to be corrected on this. I'm really guessing. But I can't imagine that there is a company out there on the planet that has an ingredient database as complex as Faithful to Nature. It is massive, guys. We really check everything. So we found that place that we could hold our suppliers accountable. Now, we have had instances, for instance, where suppliers have told us, it was quite interesting when we moved into creating different ethical parameters. So, for instance, we wanted products that were cruelty-free. And then we would have some suppliers that would say, no, but our products are cruelty-free. And we have a lot of debate that goes around the boardroom table. And we have let go of suppliers. Again, this comes back to this value, this value around bravery, is that we have had suppliers we have unfortunately had to remove from our platform because there was just too much smoke. And sometimes our suppliers get really angry with me because, for instance, we'll have an ingredient that they will come to me with a whole lot of scientific information as to why that ingredient is not actually harmful. And I get it, okay? But at the end of the day, we are selling trust and respect. So even if there is an ingredient out there in the market which is not actually bad, but all of our customers think it is bad because it's gotten a bad rap, we don't stock that ingredient. Because again, we're not selling natural and organic products, we're selling trust and respect. So we're talking to our customers. So, we've had to be really, really tough and strict and let people go. And that's why I said to Roxanne, I had to get over being liked very quickly. And we had to gain our suppliers' respect before we were able to gain their friendship.
So I can weigh in just to say that it's often easier to do the verification for more established organizations. The bigger they are, the more likely they are signed up to the UN Global Compact, the more likely they are to be doing sustainability reporting as a requirement of their listing. But I find that when it comes to private entities, which I'm assuming are the more likely ones that you'll be engaging in. Then it's actually just human nature. Like, you literally just have to enter into industry associations to basically determine what the reputation is of that company. And you'll find that if they belong to a chamber, for example, there will be people in the know about whether or not they've been, there's been compromised payment schedules or honoring of payment schedules, whether there are concerns about the veracity of the claims that are made, about the sourcing, for example, about whether they are in fact sourcing from countries that have child labor, slavery, or human trafficking concerns, etc. And it's often difficult to initiate those conversations, but I just think of it as like the human, what is that site called? Is it Hello Peter? Or like just think of it in that way. So you're literally just doing a due diligence. And it's not so much a case of sort of nitpicking, but it's just covering your back and making sure that to the extent that you are able to, you have a fair amount of confidence to enter into that relationship. And just to close, I mean, it's a funny thing, but I was quite conflicted early on within the business terrain. It's not one I'm well networked in. It's not one that I could sort of dive into my personal relationships. But a mentor of mine said to me, you want to make sure that your business partners and your shareholders, that you think of them like romantic partners, that you do not want to have the emotional damage of a rubbish relationship. That it's very easy to sort of hire and fire, but it's a lot harder convincing your customers that, in fact, you didn't take sufficient care to determine who you're working with. And that reputational runoff, unfortunately, is quite real.
I've actually got one more thing to add, if I may, quickly.
Please.
It's going back to this idea of leadership, and if there is not the sort of guarantee system in the industry that you're in, that you approve of or you respect, create your own. I think that I've seen it in the biodynamic space. There's so many peer guarantee systems that are starting to come up where suppliers in the industry are starting to create their own standards. It's something that at Faithful to Nature we've done all the time. And so often there's this perception in the market that if Faithful to Nature doesn't stock it, then obviously it's not what it says it is. And that was never the intention to create like a Faithful to Nature stamp of approval, but it's because we've regulated ourselves to such a degree that there is that perception. So, just an example so that everyone knows what I'm talking about, but 2-3 years into the business, we had tons of customers kept coming to us and saying, please stock hair dye, please stock hair dye. And we were like, no, we can't stock hair dye because there's no such thing as a natural hair dye. Like, there literally isn't such a thing as a non-toxic permanent hair dye. But customers kept saying, yeah, but you guys know how to choose the least toxic, permanent hair dye. And so we eventually relented and we started stocking the least non-toxic permanent hair dye. But we went and we put our own warnings on our website. There wasn't a regulatory body that was saying, if you stock hair dye, you need to put warnings on products. We started putting those warnings on the products. And some suppliers said, no, Noit, can't work with a company like this. And that's too bad. But, those that have stuck with us, it's really supported their brand as well. So I don't know if that's hit any resonance, but if there isn't a system that you respect, take the leadership and start creating your own.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are ending the night. I hope you felt inspired. Robyn and Khanya, thank you so much for sharing your stories with us, your wisdom, your knowledge. I think it's so profound from these two wonderful women that they're really going beyond the product. Faithful to Nature's story is not just about selling products. And the same with Matawi. We really are inspired. I've really, taken notes from tonight. I'm going back to the drawing board on certain values that I've put. I'm going there to know how to be braver, how to engage with a more profound sense of impacting community, putting dignity first, right? And being more transparent, right? So, this brings us to the end for tonight. But obviously, this prize needs to go home with someone. So I need to check from the auditors. But please give Robyn and Khanya a big round of applause for a phenomenal evening.
Thank you, Zinhle. We had a furious debate at the back there, and we've got some special mentions for. Look, there weren't a huge amount of questions tonight, but a special mention goes to Andrea from Earth and to about a question about navigating different governance structure. Mike, Sun Exchange, good question to end off there. Mike Perk, the shy guy. Thank you for your your question. You were disqualified due to the fact that he's a co-founder and investor in Heavy Chef, and therefore contravenes our values, and also because he snuck in a second question as well. That's just not on. So the prize tonight goes to Roxanne Sommelier, and well done to Roxanne. Please, can we give Roxanne a... Go. You don't have to do another walk of fame. There you go. Well done, Roxanne. Thank you. And then just lastly from me, now that my eye is okay, I just want to say thank you once again to our amazing partners. We've actually got quite a few here tonight. Obviously, we mentioned Capitalize. We've got Sir Fruit at the back there. So nice to see you. And the Massive from Exnilo, you guys rock. Zero and Pay Fast and so on. Everybody is it's so grateful. We are so grateful to have you here, and also to the Heavy Chef team, and also thank you to you guys for coming out tonight and sharing with us your energy. I encourage you to stick around for a bit, have a glass of wine, have a glass of juice or some CBD water, and try and harass our speakers tonight, because it's such an awesome opportunity to engage with such luminaries and clearly very deep thinkers on the topic of values in business. So thank you. Certainly very inspiring. And also, by the way, chat to our partners as well, because there's certainly a lot of values in amongst the partners here. So and I see quite a few chefs here tonight as well. I mean, chefs in the metaphorical sense of Heavy Chef. Siggy, I see you, brother. I see you, Bonga. Joshua, there's quite a few people that we've actually interviewed here, which is amazing to see that this kind of circular community is starting to happen, which is great. And then lastly from me, thank you to our amazing speakers, Robyn and Khanya. And then a special mention to Zinhle, because it is actually super cool to have such a luminary in amongst us and asking the questions tonight. She's not just a director of Heavy Chef Foundation, but also an admitted attorney and tax and fiduciary specialist at Investec. So she's super smart, smarter than me, certainly. And thank you for really holding court tonight. You did so well. Thank you to all three of you. It was such an amazing conversation. And I look forward to having a glass of juice / water / wine with you afterwards. Thank you. A warm round of applause. And thank you to you guys. Cool. Nice one, guys.